fitness. I think most people from a fitness, but anybody moderately fit or marathon fit, for example, would have more than enough fitness to do it. I think it's about strength and stamina, not necessarily stamina in a sporting sense, but stamina in a day in, day out persistence way, of just wanting to go at it again on the mountain, and a mental stamina.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, yeah, it's wonderful to have you here, Dom, and I've got your book on the side, which is
very good.
of The Longest Climb. And I just heard what you did, and it just blew my mind, because I think it's called EVERESTMAX.
Yeah, that's right. The title of the book is The Longest Climb, but the EVERESTMAX was our expedition team name. It was the EVERESTMAX expedition, which took place starting in 2005, finishing in 2006. The whole expedition was about 7 months in total. Yeah. So
can you share with me first, what is EVERESTMAX, and then secondly, where on earth did this idea come from?
Yeah, sure. I went to Everest in the year 2000. I went on an army expedition at the time, and I had in some ways a wonderful expedition, but also a pretty disastrous one. I was up at 8,000 meters, and I woke up at the top camp. We weren't going for the summit that day. We were just trying to get to our high point. And I woke up and I'd completely lost my vision in one eye, which is a sort of symptom sometimes of being at that altitude. And you can get retinal hemorrhages. So my retina had hemorrhaged into my eye, and there was no pain or discomfort. I just couldn't see particularly well. So that was the end of my trip, really. And I felt very sorry for myself down in base camp for the remainder of the expedition, and had to watch two of my friends go to the summit, which was wonderful. So the expedition was a success, but it's a pretty painful experience, that sense of failure sometimes. So I retreated and tried to put the mountain behind me and just persuade myself that it wasn't particularly important. And I've never been particularly obsessed with it, actually. I mean, that wasn't too difficult. I've loved exploring and climbing mountains all over the world, and I've always been more interested in unusual mountains in out-of-the-way places than I have high summits. But nevertheless, it got under my skin a bit, and I was really keen to go back. And then I by chance I read, I think in a magazine, something else, was Climbing Magazine or a National Geographic magazine or something like that, that a sort of throwaway remark that Everest had never been climbed properly, in the sense of going from the lowest point on Earth to the highest. And that sentence instantly grabbed my imagination. And that was where the idea of EVERESTMAX was born, was to take myself and a team to the lowest point on Earth, which is on the shores of the Dead Sea in Jordan, and about 8,000 kilometers from Everest. And in short, it's a pretty simple idea to try and go from the lowest point on Earth to the highest in one single push, one big ascent, which I think is about 9,300 meters. So, on paper, that's the biggest sort of climb you can do on the planet, and that was the idea.
Wow, that is absolutely, well, it's logical, but it is absolutely,
yeah.
And I think that no one else has ever attempted that, unsurprisingly, potentially.
No, I mean, it's funny that, actually, because I didn't want to sort of do it just for being the first to do it necessarily, but it really grabbed my attention geographically and in terms of the challenge, and I was just really curious to see if it could be done. And one of the first things I reached for was the atlas, and I looked at the route. And the only way of going between those two places really was through Jordan, across Syria, across Turkey, across Iran, across Pakistan. And I almost put the atlas down and thought, just this is why it hasn't been done. It's just politically too challenging. And actually, in hindsight, 2006 was probably the only year it could have been done, I would suggest, maybe the last 20 or 30 years. So in that sense, I was extraordinarily lucky. I mean, a couple of years after we were back, Syria descended into civil war. Pakistan is probably too dangerous to cycle across at the moment. So no one's ever done it since, and I think that's down to politics rather than sheer logistics. So, but it was a real lesson in seizing the moment. You know, if these things can be done, and you can go to somewhere, you know, you never know when you won't be able to. Really, there are lots of places in the world like that.
Yeah, very much so. And it's interesting because the third part of my trilogy is attempting to summit Everest, as you know, and I've kind of just said it would be great to travel overland, not at all like you, but in a truck or a train or something, or a boat. But just looking at the logistics already, I'm a bit nervous about how to actually achieve that. But maybe you're the guy to help that way.
Yeah, certainly, and it's got a lot of advantages. You know, when they went into Everest back in the 1920s in Mallory's day, they used to get the train up to Darjeeling in northern India, as it was then, and trek from there. And it was a 6-week trek-in across the Tibetan Plateau, which must have been pretty brutal. But they, you know, if you read the accounts, I think they had a fantastic 6-week training regime. You know, they were acclimatizing really slowly. And what could be better training than walking, you know, 15, 20 miles a day in the hills, gradually getting higher? And they were super fit by the time they arrived at the base camp. And they never really suffered with altitude sickness at all, because their expedition was so gradual. And you compare that with climbers these days, sometimes who go to the south side of Everest, for example. Almost all will fly into Lukla now, which is at about 3,000 meters. And from there, it's about a 10-day trek up. But a lot of trekkers and climbers still get very ill just on that hike. And actually, if you had another week longer, just 1 week longer, you could trek from the roadhead at Jiri up to Lukla, which is just from a few hundred meters up to 3,000 meters. You know, fantastic training. And just much is how you're supposed to arrive on the mountain, really. You know, not be flown into a height of halfway up the mountain, which brings itself lots of problems in itself, you know, and it's not necessarily a time saver. I think that's a bit of an illusion. So yes, I'm a great fan of getting there properly, really, and taking your time. It pays dividends in the end, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, my theory, because I don't really have time to train for it, and I've summited Mont Blanc last year, and I appreciate that mountain is very different to Everest. So I'm under no illusions that I'm an accomplished adventurer in any shape or form. But my intention was to move there around January, February time, to have 2 or 3 months to acclimatize, to look at the communities as well and the cultures, but also practice on those mountains nearby.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good idea. And I think a couple of months in country is brilliant. And it's not very pleasant, but a lot of people go to Nepal and they get ill just from the food or the water, you know, a week or two in. And again, if you're on a really tight schedule, that could just catch you out. And so annoying to go on the mountain for a sort of, you know, when you're really fired up and wanting to go for 8 weeks and you've got very specific dates, and then you arrive in Kathmandu, go out for a meal, and perhaps you're ill the next day for a week, which only weakens you. You know, you lose weight and fluids, and you've got to try and trek in. And you know, sometimes the basics are the undoing of lots of climbers like that. And I think if you can get there really early, and yeah, as you suggest, go trekking, go up into the mountains, gradually get higher, tick off some of the trekking peaks that are there, which are sort of over 6,000 meters. Some of them are sort of medium standard climbing, but not dissimilar technically to what you might get on Everest. Kinder altitude and obviously a lot safer. But, you know, in a month you could go to an area and maybe do four or five trekking peak summits with the right logistics. And I think that's immense training and preparation, and just get the body used to, you know, get the red blood cells in there and so on, and get ready for, you know, that push up to the mountain itself, and arrive fit and strong. But also allow yourself a lot of time for rest. And, you know, a lot of Everest is about resting. People forget that. Probably 80% of the time on the mountain, you're doing nothing. You know, it's all about lying around, drinking soup, tea, trying to stay hydrated, trying to sleep, and just try and keep healthy. And I think you've really got to be kind to yourself. But absolutely, arriving in country early is a great idea.
Yeah, that's good then, because I'm not sure how you planned yours, but mine's a little bit off the cuff and a little bit whimsical. But I do have 2 years now to pull it down and get the logistics and the operations together. Because yeah,
absolutely. And I think with what you're trying to do in a year is just to allow yourself plenty of time you know, it's great that you're allowing yourself a couple of months before. I think you need that big buffer in between, don't you? Whatever event or challenge you're doing, you never know, you know, if you've got some time for injuries, for illness, and you've got a bit of space and a bit of headspace in between, actually.
Yeah.
Is really important. I mean, I came away from Everest in 2006 completely unscathed, physically, no frostbite or anything like that. But I'd lost 3.5 stone in weight. Some of it from the cycling there, I think I lost about half that weight, which was good for me. You know, that was my training. I needed to, and I was fit and healthy when I arrived on the mountain. But then you know, you starve on the mountain. I just didn't. You don't want to eat very much. And I remember a guide saying to me on the mountain when I was there, Russell Bryce, who's probably arguably the most experienced guide that's been on the mountain, that when he got back home, you know, he embarked on a sort of 6-week running and weight training program. And I thought this is utterly bizarre. I thought when I get home, you know, I'm hitting the cake and the beer to recover, you know. But I realised a few weeks later it was really good advice, because you get back, you know, if you lost a lot of muscle mass as well, you're really weakened. And of course, you need a break of a few days, maybe a couple of weeks, but actually you've got to get back out there and physically recover and get that strength back that you worked so hard to get in the first place. You know, otherwise you can end up definitely much weaker than you did before.
Yeah, that's really wise words, because again, there's a lot of threads to different conversations I've been having today, but the competition doesn't end at the top of Everest. You know, the summit is at the summit, but you have to get down, and then there's also the life afterwards as well. So what I'm hearing is making sure my ending, so to speak, is a good month, maybe 2 months after, when either I summit or not Everest.
Absolutely, and it's very common also. I mean, you talk about summit and the getting down. I mean, it's so true. It's I don't have a memory of feeling particularly tired on the way up at all. I've done mountains which have been more demanding in terms of physical duration. You know, you mentioned Mont Blanc. Actually, I did Mont Blanc many years ago in winter, and we just had an absolute epic, you know. And I think by the time we got down, we'd been on the go for 48 hours, and it was just, you know, I was physically in pieces, and I was far more tired doing that actually than this. But nevertheless, when you get to the top of Everest, you know, and of course you've got a lot of mental focus to get yourself there. And our ascent went pretty smoothly, I suppose. You know, we had a lot of casualties around us. When we got there, you know, you've been on the go for maybe 12 hours from the top camp, and of course the days before that as well, in order to get up there. And I do remember just suddenly being hit by a wave of tiredness, thinking, well, you know, that's great, we've done it now, but you know, this is the really dangerous bit. And of course, the more tired you get, the more likely you are to make silly mistakes, whether it's just tripping over your own feet, you know, on the way down, which is very easy to do, not clipping things in properly, not putting your gloves on properly, not putting your goggles on properly, not monitoring your oxygen. All of these are basic things that you can do very well when you're alert and you're fired up. When you've had that sense of elation, you think, oh, it's in the bag now, and you've still maybe got a 12-hour descent to get down safely. That's the bit when you've got to be very, very careful. And I think maybe some people don't keep enough back getting to the summit. But you're absolutely right. It's getting to the summit and thinking about that's the halfway point, really. Maybe not even that, actually, you know, in terms of duration.
Yeah, and I'm actually better up than down. Down.
Yeah, I think most people are. And it's always safer going up, because you're looking. I know you spend a lot of time looking down your knees trying to catch your breath back. You know, you tend to walk 10 steps, but it means you're always inspecting the route in front of you. And you know, a little rock or an obstacle is at eye level a few seconds before you get to it, and that's very safe. Because you're going so slowly, you've got time to pick your route very carefully. And coming down, you know, your legs step out a little bit. You know, you want to get down, you're a bit more hasty, and maybe there's some fixed rope up there, but you know, I came down long stretches without clipping into it, just because I couldn't be bothered. I wanted to get down quickly, you know. But that's where haste catches you out, isn't it?
Yeah, I might not be as motivated as you not to clip. Yeah, and I was reading your book a little bit last night, and you mentioned something about when you arrived in Kathmandu, you were struggling to eat at altitude, especially around breakfast time. And something I'm very aware of is, you know, I'm quite lean as it is already, and I'm doing my best to put on weight for these competitions and these events coming up. How did you overcome eating at altitude and being able to ingest?
Yeah, I'm sort of quite infamous amongst my friends for just starving myself at altitude. Really, I'm very good at stocking up before I go. But yeah, I mean, if you're lean and in good condition when you arrive, I think that is a problem actually. And I've climbed with a few people who've been super fit when they arrive, which can be dangerous. You know, if your body fat level is not high enough, and if that in combination means that you're not eating well on the mountain, then that's potentially a real problem. I think some of it comes with experience, because the taste buds do very funny things once you get to base camp, and I found a lot of the food I didn't want to eat, I really struggled with, but you also have some odd cravings for other things. And you mentioned going to Nepal before, and I think maybe if you go up to modest altitude, you might get a feel for that. You know, in base camp, you normally have a cook there who's maybe cooking a lot of eggs, you know, omelets and pancakes, noodles and things like that. Noodles, I just couldn't handle. You know, I wouldn't have a problem if I was trekking lower at altitude, but up at altitude, it just turned my stomach every time. Pancakes smothered in honey, I didn't have a problem with, and they make very doughy pancakes. But that was fantastic. So I think you've got to find what you like. And I've noticed most climbers that have been there several times, especially the guides and so on, a lot of them pack a barrel, one of these big blue sort of rafting barrels that you can air freight and so on, full of treats. And by treats, it could be anything that they've learnt that they quite enjoy at altitude, that their taste buds crave. A lot of people take wine gums. I know some of the commercial groups take a selection of fine cheeses, you know, because you get crackers up there, and crackers and cheese. It's just something that you can sort of nibble on, you know, in the evenings or whatever. I've got fond memories of, we invited our neighbourly Spanish team when we were at base camp, and they came across, and for a sort of drinks party, you know, we had a few beers, and they came across with an enormous dried ham and a knife, and they just hung this up in the tent and carved off, you know, this dried Parma ham, which was incredibly salty, and we just devoured it. You know, we all were absolutely craving it, and it was the most bizarre thing. But these sort of treats, I think, make a huge difference, and I think trying to seek that out, you know, as and when you go to altitude, and find what works for you, and having as much variety as possible makes a real difference, because you've just got to get those calories in.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And it's interesting because I'm actually plant-based. So a lot of what you mentioned, I won't be, well, I'll choose not to eat anyway. So I might have to bring myself a container full of high nutrient.
Definitely. You know, and yeah, just of what works, I think. I've always loved chocolate on the mountains. If I was in the Alps, I'd eat chocolate. I'd feed myself on that regularly. You know, it's a good sort of calorie source. In the Himalayas, you know, above 7,000 meters, absolutely no interest. So it's, yeah, I've just got to find these things out, really.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, because I mean, it's very hard to train for altitude living where I do, because there is nowhere of high altitude. And as I've said, I've been to the Alps, but it is high, but it's not.
No, and I think it's above 6,000 meters where these feelings really kick in. But that's where some trekking peaks would be really useful in Nepal. You know, and spending a few days in a tent up at that, you know, what I'd call extreme altitude once you go above 6,000, and yeah, just get a feel for what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, very wise. Yeah, and yeah, I suppose I'm blessed that I do have that time to process and trial what works and doesn't work, to make sure I'm ready and lean or fit enough to do it, whatever that may look like.
Yeah, and I don't think I often get asked when I do talks and so on about what level of fitness is required for the mountain, and actually it's a very distracting issue, fitness, because I don't think it's really about the fitness. I think most people from a fitness, but anybody moderately fit or marathon fit, for example, you know, would have more than enough fitness to do it. I think it's about strength and stamina, not necessarily stamina in a sporting sense, but stamina in a day in, day out, persistence way, you know, of just wanting to go at it again on the mountain, and a mental stamina. You know, I climbed on the north side where the distance between base camp and advanced base camp is 22 kilometers. And that 22 kilometers between the two camps, you've got to trek. It's a walk. There's nothing technical or difficult about it, but it's a 22-kilometer trek between 5,600 meters and 6,400 meters. So, above the height of Kilimanjaro, let's say, above the summit of that. And it is an enormous undertaking. It's just physically so demanding. And when you get down to advanced base camp and you've been on the mountain and you've taken some kit up and you get back to 6,400 meters, it is so tempting just to sit there and think that you're going to rest and recover. But 6,400 isn't low enough to recover properly. And you've got to have the mental stamina as well as the physical stamina to get yourself up the next day and walk that 22 kilometers all the way back to base camp, knowing that in 3 days' time, you're going to have to walk all the way back up again. Right. But the difference in going back to base camp is that you're at a lower altitude, your appetite will improve, you'll get a bit more oxygen, you will eat well for 3 days, your head will readjust to getting back and be hungry to go back on the mountain again. Mm-hmm. And I notice a big difference in those people that just want to sort of mong at ABC because it's too hard to go all the way back down, as opposed to having that drive to get back down and actually having the drive to rest properly. That's what I'm trying to say. Having the determination to look after yourself and your personal admin, getting low enough to eat and recover. Really important.
Yeah, that's really wise. And just to put it into context, because when I summited Mont Blanc, that was about 10 kilometers. And I did it with my 71-year-old father, but it took us 10 hours to come back down. So the distance sounds short, should we say, but it takes a mammoth amount of time in altitude.
Absolutely, and it's a similar feeling. I mean, Mont Blanc is, it's a long way down, and it's, I remember the first time I did Mont Blanc, I got down and the train was shut, so then I had another slog down into the valley, just demoralizing. But, that's a good example of what can happen on the mountain. You think you're going to get back down to Camp 2 or Camp 1, lower altitude to rest, and you got there. Unfortunately, this didn't happen to me, but it happened to someone else on my team. They got down and through a mix-up, there was no food left in the tent. So they couldn't spend the night there. Somebody had eaten the food on the way up, or sometimes teams take other people's food. That's not unheard of. Mm. So, you've just constantly got to be prepared for the worst. And, you get down to that tent, and if there's no food or there's no stove or no gas to melt water on, you've got to keep going another 3 hours down to the camp below. So having plenty left in the tank is really important.
What I'm also hearing as well, it's about those milestones, making sure that I don't pin all my hopes on this one thing, this fixated point of stopping at base camp 2 or base camp 1, wherever it may be, to have, as you said, a little bit left mentally as well as physically to take myself further if I need to.
Yeah, sure. And I think the mountain is long enough that you can learn on the mountain as well, but, very modest targets. Most people on the mountain are very good at going, to Camp 1 and find out what that feels like, spending a night there, where everybody almost certainly feels absolutely rubbish. And that's when you say to yourself, what the hell am I doing here? This is just such a bad idea. And then, of course, you get back to base camp, exhausted, but you feel a little bit better the next day. And you think, well, okay, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I can just go a little bit higher. But this time I'm not going to take so-and-so with me, or this time I'm going to make sure I eat this, or take more water because I got through it quickly. So you've got a bit of space on the mountain to learn, but it's listening to your own constant feedback all the time, really crucial.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And to switch the conversation slightly back to the name of the challenge you created, which was EVERESTMAX. How did you come up with that name?
Gosh, I've got no recollection. I think we were looking for something catchy that summed up the maximum, the maximum possible altitude that we could make. I'm sure it was around a table in a pub somewhere or something like that. It took me a couple of years to get that expedition off the ground because it just, I sort of rang up everybody that, excuse me, I used to go climbing with and so on, and most of them were married now and had small kids or things like this, and said, oh, great idea, but yeah, not for me, 6 months, thank you. And gradually I found 4 sort of willing participants to come with me. And they were a fantastic team. And it was the 5 of us that did it together.
Yeah.
So yeah, the name must have come out of one of our planning sessions around a table somewhere at some stage.
Yeah, and no pressure at all, but I'm struggling for a name for my trilogy of.
Oh, I'm good at coming up with names. I'll put my mind to it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. The Strong Trilogy. I mean, it's got a ring to it, hasn't it?
There is one guy who did it, but without doing the race across America. He cycled America, and he called it the ultimate triathlon.
Yeah.
I think we can do better.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, no, I'll put my mind to it. I like coming up with these things.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge, Dom. And I'm sure I'll get a lot more in the book, and I'll be emailing you with questions if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all.
If it's okay, if I could leave with just 5 more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Yep.
The first is, looking at the world today, what is the one skill you think leaders need?
I think it's vision, certainly still. I mean, leaders need a whole suite of skills, don't they? Especially on a mountain, like adaptability, and the ability to listen is really important. But I think vision, actually. I was watching my kids yesterday, the SpaceX launch and so on, and an interview with Elon Musk, who's quite a character, quite the individual, isn't he? But, I was just staggered, what vision he had to make those things and other things happen. Most of us, if we said we're going to start a private space company or whatever, even if we had the money, the number of setbacks must be incredible daily. And the number of accidents en route and running out of money and technical difficulties. But he just really had this steadfast vision, and has clearly attracted in his case, lots of engineers and experts to help him in his goal. But he's ultimately behind that success. And whatever people think of him, it's pretty incredible. And it does come down to that quality of vision. I think vision is really important. And you must have that. I mean, to make these ideas happen. You've got to be bold, haven't you? You've got to start with a bit of paper at some stage and say, I reckon this can be done. The rest will follow later.
Or a 10-hour online summit.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. And what do you follow more? Is it logic or intuition?
I follow logic in that I believe firmly in really good preparation and taking advice as much as you can. For example, arriving on a mountain with the right kit, with a good plan. So in that respect, I'm really logical. I think when you get into the heat of a summit day or other scenarios, then that's when intuition kicks in. But I strongly believe intuition is more likely to be well considered and correct if logic has been applied beforehand.
Yeah, wise. Thank you. And how do you deal with perceived failure or not achieving your goals?
Oh gosh, I've had lots of failures, believe me. I failed in Everest before. I spent 3 weeks climbing the wrong mountain in South America once, and pulled myself up to the top, only to see the actual mountain I was aiming for was about 10 kilometers away behind. So I've had many setbacks, a lot of which I can look back and laugh at now. And I think, maybe as cheesy as it sounds, that you've got to treat them as learning experiences. And, I'm not a talented climber, and I don't think I was somebody that maybe was ready for Everest the first time. But failing it once, I came away with a wealth of information, a lot of do's and don'ts in my head that I felt 10 times more confident going back a second time, thinking, I've got this sorted because of what went wrong before. And I think that applies in so many things, doesn't it? It doesn't matter if it's an exam, driving test, or trying to reach a sporting goal or something like that. I think that when things go wrong, as long as that's constructive failure, I think you can learn from them. And it's taken me a long time to learn that. I think when I failed in my 20s, I really beat myself up about it. And now I'm quite resigned to it. And I don't mind failing on a mountain because it just gives you an excuse to go back again. You climb it the first time, and then you're looking at one trip less, aren't you, really? Which is, that's the way I look at it now.
Yeah, that's interesting. And climbing the wrong mountain is just definitely something I would do. I've gone to the wrong country. I the competition in China for World Championships, I booked everything for Hanoi, which is in Vietnam. I'm sorry, in Vietnam. So I actually went to the wrong country.
Very easy to do.
The only reason I knew is my visa was declined because I didn't have a way to get there.
Not the time to find out.
Yeah, exactly. And what keeps you motivated every single day?
Oh, I'm a bit. I think when it comes to traveling, I'm a bit of a dreamer. All of my trips have started with maps, actually. You know, I love a good map and an atlas. And my wife laughs at me because I quite like just opening our Ordnance Survey map in the evening and just planning a run or a bike ride or something like that, or a walk for family, actually. I love logistically putting something together. And all my big trips have started with maps, actually, or picking out mountain summits. Or I cycled across the Himalayas when I was 19, trying to go to all 14 8,000-meter base camps in one long trip. And of course, the danger of maps is you use the scale and you think, oh, that will take 2 months. And it actually took me 5. But, you know, that was just naivety at the time and not really having it. But, you know, I think, yeah, maps and books, of course, are a constant source of inspiration for traveling, which I love.
Yeah, thank you so much. And finally, to everyone listening, what one message would you like to leave us with?
I think as we come out of this this crisis at the moment, you know, there's a lot of discussion about when can we travel again. And I think we've all got to be a little bit more cautious there, you know, from an environmental point of view. I mean, this has been running for months and years now, but I think this not traveling has really thrown the penalty of flying in and the cost of it into perspective, I think, hasn't it? And until a few years ago, I was very proud that I must have been to 70 or 80 countries, you know, and I was really proud of my sort of record traveling. And now that's not something that I think I would advertise in talks anymore. I'm embarrassed by it, really, because my air miles through my life must be absolutely horrific, absolutely horrific. So one of the things when we come out of this is I'd really, and I think maybe we can all do this, is just try and travel more responsibly. And that's difficult because flying is not good, we know that. But I think it's possible to go on maybe fewer trips, but better trips and longer trips. And I'm a great fan of cycling. I certainly haven't done a race across America, but, you know, I've cycled across a couple of continents. And it's just the best way in the world to travel. You know, it's cheap, it gets you fit. And so I would urge people to do that too, you know, if they're going somewhere in Europe or they live in America, to think about making a big trip, a big tour of it. And I think we've all got to really think twice and maybe not jet off to the far side of the world for a week, which used to seem impossibly glamorous just because we could do it. And I think we need to reassess that. And I'm a great fan of the explorers of old, you know, who used to go on 6-month trips, which isn't always possible. But yeah, that would be my message. I mean, let's travel, let's still travel, but let's travel better and more cautiously.
Yeah, and that's part of why I'm actually traveling to Nepal via So Travel, is how many other cultures and countries will I pass through, and a plethora of other experiences that will enrich my life and the journey as well. So
absolutely. I mean, I teach, and one of the students I teach is taking a gap year, and they want to go to India, and they're actually going by train, which I just thought was fantastic. You know, to get there because they don't want to fly, but they'll have an amazing adventure doing that, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. You know, and I think we should all consider this, even if it's not always possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Dom, for your time and your knowledge. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome. I wish you all the best in your endeavours. It's incredibly exciting, and I'm very jealous. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you. I'll be in touch. And for anyone else wanting to get in touch, what's your website?
My website's domfaulkner.com, and there's all the social media links and stuff like that on there. So yeah, anytime. And the book is The Longest Climb, which I that's the one. Thank you. Which I wrote. You know, I hope anybody going on the mountain would find a lot of useful advice in there, because it comes from, it's about failure as well as success. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think that's really important. And I'm speaking to Alex Staniforth just after you as well, who has attempted to summit Everest twice as well. So I'm looking forward to his story, which flows nicely in from yours. Good stuff. Brilliant. All the best, and I hope it goes well. Thank you so much.
Bye
Bye for now. Bye bye then.